Man, it's so cold inside of here. It's a good thing I got this Evo jacket. You know what I'm saying? Hey, what's up, viewers? I am the Purple Sharpie, otherwise known as Sharpie, if you're feeling especially competitive today. I am here with a fantastic duo, Danny D, who is the producer, designer, and writer of the new project High Elo Girls. How are you doing today, Danny?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Thank you for telling me. And of course, I have the amazing Vivi Contrast here, who is the communication managers for the project known of High Elo Girls. How are you doing today, Vivi?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for asking, Sharpie.
Thank you once again for telling me. So communicative today. You love to see it. You know, it's kind of wild because I had a close little friend tell me that High Elo Girls is a new project coming out. Danny, can you tell me some more about it?
Yeah, I would be more than happy to. So High Elo Girls is an inclusive esports visual novel in which you play as the latest recruit of an all girls esports team.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. Oh, wait 1 second. You sure? Okay, my friend is telling me that apparently we have a trailer or something we can roll. Let's go ahead and roll it.
Man.
I gotta tell you, that trailer's got me ready to press some buttons. Danny, where did you come out with this concept?
Oh man, how do I even begin? So basically, I've just been orbiting and playing in the competitive gaming space for a really, really long time. I would say over a decade at this point. So it just felt very natural to try to, make my first game as a studio revolve around this sort of ecosystem. So yeah, just kind of went for it because I have a lot of love, a lot of passion, and a lot of years spent, around esports and just competitive gaming in general.
Vivian, would you say that as the communications manager and basically someone that's in charge of making sure that the game gets inside of the right eyes, do you feel like the competitive gaming community is reflected inside of this game as pretty organically?
I would say, yeah. The game is based sort of around like the MOBA genre, but I do think that all game genres, whether it's FGC, whether it's MOBA, whether it's FPS, I think a lot of the competitive elements and the community elements as well, I think are very well reflected in High Elo Girls for sure.
So, Danny, I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of your entry into, I understand you were part of the fighting game community. Is that correct?
So I actually, my very first game that got me like remotely curious about competitive gaming at a very young age, at probably too young, is Mortal Kombat. So I like barely hit double digits. I was like maybe 10 when I came across this game. I know it's terrible. but I was, like as a kid, I was like, ooh, spectacle. I was like this amazing tournament and there are girls who are actually fighting. right? I saw Sonya Blade and MK1, and then we got the twins and MK2, and I was like, I'm committed. So yeah, I would say that was the first game that I really fell in love with, and the first game that I became aware of that you could have like a competitive community around.
So I kind of want to barrow into the competitive side of that community a little bit. As you know, Mortal Kombat is considered a traditional fighting game, which is a part of the fighting game community. The fighting game community has built up events like Evo, Combo Breaker, NEC, Winter Brawl, a series of plethora of very, very flesh history inside of there. Very frequently, you do see people of color, specifically Black people, inside of that community. And it's really interesting to me because this game, High Elo Girls, actually takes place inside the MOBA genre, where you don't see as many people of color in general, especially Black people. And then inside of this story, you actually experience it through the eyes of a Black femme. Talk to me about that choice for obviously a lens inside of the story.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, MOBA esports communities, like you said, because of the demographics that are typically associated with them, just like visibly, they can feel very hostile to anyone who, sits outside of those demographics. And I initially started with Mortal Kombat, but I did end up playing one of the biggest MOBAs out there, which I'm like, it shall remain nameless for now.
In our defense, that game, when it came out, fulfilled so many people's fantasies of just quitting whatever they were doing and doing that full time. That was the first game that our generation had like that, where it was like anybody's. Because I understand, because I got to a shinier rank than I feel comfortable saying on this stream, if you understand what I'm
I know.
trying to say.
Here.
I'm very disappointed in the amount of time I spent inside of that game. I'm disappointed in myself, so I get it. But I was curious, and Vivian, maybe you can speak on this a little bit if you like, but do you feel as though there are certain aspects of the current competitive community that are starting to change for the better inside of these fields? For example, I believe Evil Geniuses actually just announced that they actually have picked up an all femme-based Valorant team.
You want to talk about that, D, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, so do we want to talk about the history of like all femme or all female or all women teams? Because man, I will say, there have been orgs that have definitely come and tried to do that sort of thing. Like, I think off the top of my head, Counter Logic Gaming had, like CLG Red for such a long time. And it's like, there are some instances from the top down where, like, organizations will give it a go and will try, but there's still such an embedded culture of like being hostile to your traditional demographic. That includes women a lot of the times. That includes gender nonconforming people, and I feel like now is the time where we're actually starting to see, more outward support for that tentatively. But there's definitely a history of people trying and communities not being very welcoming.
Understandable. Oh, sorry, please chime in, Vivian.
Oh, yeah. I think that I will admit that there is progress. We are seeing a lot more femme presenting esports players in the scene. Like Dee mentioned, where we have CLG Red. We also have, I think there are some teams under Dignitas. Team Liquid recently announced that they had an all-female Valorant team, as well as their brand ambassador Aerial Powers. So we are seeing progress being made in terms of seeing more representation from people of color, Indigenous people, Black people, but we still have a long way to go in terms of actually providing equitable resources for people from marginalized communities.
One of the things and one of the topics that's actually spoken about inside of the game, as well as inside of the mission statement that you presented when you were applying for the specific interview, was that misogynoir, otherwise known as the act of otherwise attacking specifically Black women inside of the community for their voices, is something that happens on a daily basis inside of the gaming community. I am obviously a very well-known voice inside of the fighting game community now as a very, very visible Black femme person. And one of the things I've consistently said happens is that exact thing, massage noir, every single day on every single level. And there's so much you just have to remove from yourself. I would be interested in knowing either of your thoughts, starting with Danny, on how that is addressed inside of the game and why it was addressed in that capacity inside of the game.
Oh yeah. So something that I think is often at the root of something like misogynoir specifically is this sort of dehumanizing element. You know, this kind of devaluing and making Black women specifically feel like they don't belong, like they shouldn't be there. So what you actually have, and this is, I have very strong opinions on this, is, you know, we're not necessarily visible in these spaces because we're not there. We definitely are. We spend a lot of time playing these games and mastering these games, but with hypervisibility comes that degree of, you know, like ostracizing of, you know, people who look like us. And it's really terrifying to step out into the light and to be seen as, you know, like one of those people repping, you know, this demographic of folks who are just like constantly like just stomped upon pretty much. And so in the game, it's told from very specifically a Black femme, from the perspective of the player character. You know, like in some games, you know, visual novels specifically, you'll have a protagonist who's like more of a blank slate, who anybody can project onto, but it was really important to me that it's coming from the perspective of the Black female playing these games. And then, you know, the protagonist also struggles with anxiety, like some serious mental health challenges. And a big part of that comes with being embedded in communities that outwardly don't seem to value her for so long. And then similarly, there's also another Black female character who is one of her teammates, and she also struggles with how to present herself, you know, how to be read in these spaces or how not to be read. You know, she's very shy. She doesn't put herself out there because it's very scary. Even though she's very, very, very good at the game, you know, all of the people on the team are extremely high level. You know, they're not just sort of like random amateurs coming in trying to, you know, make a name for themselves without actually being able to hack it. Like, they're very skilled players, but they do face challenges that are very specific to how people view them, based on their identities. So in the game, it's one of those difficult topics where I'm making a game. I'm making a fun experience. I don't want to overload players with, like, you know, an after school special where you feel really, really bad and then you walk away and you know, it's a very depressing experience. I hope it's entertaining. I want it to be fun, but at the same time, we don't shy away from the fact that, you know, like 2 of our characters are experiencing misogynoir in a very specific way, and it influences how they move in those spaces. So yeah, it's trying to strike a balance between addressing something that is a very serious issue while also making sure that, you know, it's not the only thing that they're known for in this game. You know, like, they're funny people. They have very well-rounded personalities. I want them to be memorable, because I wouldn't want myself, you know, I wouldn't want to be reduced to my struggle, even though it's a very real one. I want people to walk away from it, you know, getting all sides to their experience.
I'd like to ask a little bit, Vivian, if you would feel comfortable elaborating a little bit more, because there is also the queer experience explained and showcased inside of this game. Do you feel as though it is a truly authentic and a truly real telling empathetically regarding the experience that queer individuals may experience inside of a competitive gaming space? Obviously, I'd like to mention a very, very well-known queer player by the name of the Sonic Fox, who is arguably the best fighting game player of our generation, who is very visibly queer, obviously very visibly also Black. But I want to focus more on the queerness aspect, because every single time that they win a tournament, they tweet out, "I'm gay," or they're specifically out there saying that they're not okay with radical feminists, obviously. So especially trans exclusionary radical feminists. So it's really interesting to see that there is certain levels of obviously expression of queerness inside of competitive gaming. But even with that example, I feel as though the game still does a great job of capturing the queer energy inside of competitive gaming. Do you agree with that notion, as well as believe that it is true to the competitive side?
I think so. I think one of the things that I like that really drew me personally to this game was that all the characters are queer and they're out and loud, like they're proudly queer. But that's the part of the overall experience, right? It's like they're great gamers, like they're all great gamer gals, and they happen to be queer, right? It's like it strikes that good balance between like I am who I am, and no matter what, like, no matter how I identify as, I can still be a good gamer. And it's reflected a lot also in these different spaces as well, especially like we mentioned before, there's a larger presence of queerness out there by way of people like Sonic Fox outwardly saying, every time they win a game, it's like, hey, like I won this. Also, hey, I'm queer, I'm gay, right? That encourages a chain reaction of other queer gamers to be like, oh, hey, well, if they're gay and they can make it here, I can also do the same. And that's reflected quite a bit from what I've seen in like the game itself. So yes, I do agree with the notion. I think it's one, Halo Girls does reflect the existence of queer identities in the space. It also shows the actual like experiences that they face like on a regular basis.
I want to pull it back over to Danny for a moment, because one thing that's really very heavily discussed and commonplace, specifically outside of gaming, more on the business side of gaming, less of the leisure side, is the sustainability of esports in general. As you know, this is a conversation that has gone beyond our decade and speaking here, but it's something that is a very real threat for obviously all these characters because it is their livelihood. Talk to me about how that expression comes through inside of the game as well.
So the basis of the game is that this team, Momentum Gaming, is actually looking for a substitute. They're originally a 5-person squad, but they need to have a 6th person in order to be competitively viable for a tournament that comes around every 5 years. And basically, what you win if you win the tournament is the chance to enter a closed esports league. So, in the past, when it comes to esports, you would have prior to what we now know as like a franchise system, where if you're part of a league, you can't just like scrub out and therefore lose your sponsorships and lose access to monetization. Before we had franchise systems for leagues, you would have organizations coming together, fielding a team for maybe a year, but if they weren't able to make enough money in tournament winnings or rev share or sponsorships, those orgs would go. They would come into being for like 8 months and then they would be non-existent. So the thing about the way we wanted to set up this tournament is that it's part of the franchise system. So once you're in, you're in. There's a huge buy-in. You basically have to pay like $10 million to get a spot, or you can compete in this tournament that happens every 5 years and potentially get your way into like a more stable system. But the fact is, some, depending on which kind of genre you're looking at, either it's like MOBA or it's FGC or it's FPS, some of these professional careers can last from like 3 years to 10 plus years. In the MOBA space, we have actually seen people, their esports careers might burn out at like 4 years. So if your average player has like a 4-year long career and this tournament comes around every 5 years, this is essentially a make or break situation. So they either get in, they get the chance to go pro this way because it's fundamentally impossible to pay for a $10 million spot, or they don't get in and their dreams are crushed. Like it's a very it's a very make or break system. It's very not sustainable at all, but it's the kind of ecosystem that attracts a lot of really passionate people who they have a dream and they're like, I want to do this, I want to go pro, and they'll take any chance they can get. So I hope it's like an accurate reflection of how wild it can be, in terms of, is it a sustainable, can you sustain a team? Can you pay your players? What do health benefits look like? I
are there health benefits?
Are there? something that's really funny is there's actually in the game there's an offer. So the lead character is like, oh, so what's in the contract if I do, get onto this team? And the owner is like, you have healthcare, you have dental, you have like access to stock options. And someone who actually played it was like, this is a dream. Like they were like, what?
That's the fakest thing about this game.
Like, what? This is the most fantastical part of what you're trying to make me play. So
I love that. I love that.
I hope it's reflective, because like being a fan in these spaces, I have seen teams come and go like super, super quickly, and players come and go because they haven't been able to sustain it.
I want to kind of change gears because I feel like we got really, really deep. And as much as I personally enjoyed it, I'd hate for our viewers to get stuck on the house of cards that is esports. So I'd like to kind of move on over to the topic of competitive gaming and casual gaming. Both obviously start with the letter C, both mean completely different things on an incredibly hot tinderbox match conversation inside of, regardless of which community you're in gaming. Specifically inside of esports and the MOBA community, the casual community is in no way, shape, or form really reflected, even when it comes to certain types of fun or educated content. So talk to me about the choice between obviously creating a more accessible version of a competitive telling game, because many people never get to see this story. Many people never understand actually what that process looks like of joining a team, of being brought onto a team, and what you're required to do on the team. So this is kind of an in-depth look into that. And how did you make it so that someone who was very possibly a little bit more casual, maybe a little bit less competitive, able to also understand and empathize with that story?
Ooh, well, the goal is to make it as accessible as possible on that front, because you're absolutely right. It's a very esoteric field, and unfortunately, because it does come with some hostility to people who might traditionally see themselves more reflected on the casual side of things, to the point where they might not feel like they can try to get interested in competitive. I really wanted this to make some jargon that you might see thrown around in esports, make some of the inner workings of how an esports league functions, how teams work. I wanted to make that as easy to digest as possible for people who might be interested in esports but might not know where to start because they don't see themselves reflected, or they don't feel courted by people who are trying to attract, diehard esports fans. If a lot of your marketing is targeting only one demographic, then it makes sense that there are going to be some people who are like, that's not for me. So yeah, I think also doing it from the perspective of a younger person who's aspiring to enter that sort of, like massive ecosystem, but they're not already embedded in it, made it a little bit easier to sort of be like, here's what it looks like from the outside. And then, here's what it can look like once you start getting in. So just making it digestible, making it fun, highlighting the challenges, but not hyper focusing on that, making sure that things that there's like positivity and fun that offsets the negativity that comes with it. Because again, it's not that we're not there. It's that a lot of the times we don't feel welcome.
Yes.
And we don't feel, pulled in to the point where we can actually like have a good time and feel like we belong there. So that's like very, very crucial for me. That's something that's very important with this game.
100%. I completely understand that. Well, unfortunately, we're running very slightly out of time here. So I unfortunately very succinctly have to bring this interview to a close. Danny, thank you so much for spending time with me. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me ramble, because I will definitely ramble about this stuff.
Oh, me too, girl.
Given the platform.
It ain't a thing. Vivian, thank you so much as well for taking time to be here. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And it's great to talk to you as well.
Okay, everybody, that's going to do it for this specific developer interview. Stay tuned. We have even more of Game Devs of Sonic. You can't interrupt me when I'm It's available on Steam right now. You don't have to wishlist the demo. You can just literally play it right now on Steam. Well, okay. I have it on good referral from a very close friend that apparently this mind-numbing, amazing experience of a game is currently available right now on Steam. Check it out. We have even more of this Game Devs of Color Expo 2022 coming up. Stay tuned.